Right, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a highly volatile, rapidly escalating military situation right in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, for this briefing, we are relying entirely on critical, on-the-ground intelligence sourced directly from sonophiles.com. If you're a high-level decision maker, a supply chain manager, or a geopolitical analyst, this is exactly the kind of executive briefing you need to get up to speed on the absolute latest developments. We're looking at a scenario where some of the world's most vital shipping routes are essentially intersecting with active military deployments. So let's get right into the data. To keep things tight, we've structured this explainer across 6 key areas. We're going to track everything from the initial escalation warning and military capabilities all the way through the regional timeline, and finally, what this means for global logistics and security. All right, let's kick things off with part 1, the Strait Escalation Warning. To really understand the current threat environment, as reported by Cinephiles on May 5, 2026, we have to start with this incredibly uncompromising statement from Major General Amir Hatami, the commander-in-chief of the Iranian Army. He issued a very clear, sharply worded warning that any attempt by U.S. aircraft carriers to approach the Strait of Hormuz is going to face a decisive military response. I mean, when a military commander flat out says that every single inch of a strategic waterway is under their direct will, that's a zero-tolerance policy. Plain and simple. This isn't just tough talk or some theoretical risk. This is an active, stated military posture that completely upends the security dynamic and one of the most critical maritime choke points on the planet. Moving right along to Section 2, Active Deterrence and Capabilities. So it's one thing to issue a verbal threat, right? But it's an entirely different thing to actually position the hardware to back it up. And Iran's stated active deterrence posture relies on highly specific, engaged weaponry. The source material confirms that cruise missiles and combat drones aren't just sitting in some reserve storage facility somewhere. They are explicitly activated in the airspace. That means they are powered up, they are targeted, and they are ready to go. On top of that, they've deployed suicide drones across the entire region, signaling a state of immediate, heightened operational readiness. You've probably heard the term suicide drones before, or maybe loitering munitions. It's absolutely crucial to understand just how much of an asymmetric threat these pose to any vessel navigating that waterway, whether military or commercial. Unlike a traditional missile that gets fired directly at a target, these drones can literally just hang out. They loiter in the sky for extended periods, waiting for a specific radar signature or a target of opportunity, and then they crash into it with an explosive payload. They're cheap, they're notoriously hard to detect, and they are incredibly disruptive. Which brings us to Section 3, Stealth versus Continuous Surveillance. What we're seeing here is a massive, high-stakes game of cat and mouse, contrasting U.S. naval tactics with Iranian counter-tactics, but played out with billions of dollars of military hardware and global economic stability hanging in the balance. Sonophiles reports a direct tactical clash. On one hand, you have U.S. aircraft carriers attempting a stealthy approach toward the strait by using radar silence, basically turning off their active emissions so they don't get spotted. But on the other hand, General Hatami stressed that despite the U.S. trying to slip by quietly, Iran's continuous surveillance over the Gulf waters successfully detected them anyway. They are making it known that their response capabilities are fully engaged regardless of any U.S. stealth efforts. The Iranian commander really hammered home that safeguarding this region is a completely non-negotiable priority for them. By publicly calling out the failure of U.S. radar silence to bypass their detection, Iran is projecting absolute confidence in their situational awareness. They're basically broadcasting that the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz is something they are prepared to actively fight for. Zero compromises. Okay, let's pivot to Section 4, the timeline of regional escalation. To really wrap our heads around the gravity of this, we need to zoom out and look at the broader historical timeline over the last year. Events like this don't just happen in a vacuum, and spotting the pattern is key for predictive analysis. Just look at how this built up chronologically. Back in June 2025, we got the initial signals about readiness to close the strait. Then by December 2025, tensions really spiked with confrontations over the nuclear file. Fast forward to April 2026, and the rhetoric had escalated all the way to readiness for a ground war. It's this steady, relentless drumbeat of escalation that leads us straight into May 2026 and the reported launch of the U.S. operation dubbed Project Freedom. And that brings us to day one. The Sonophiles reporting highlights headlines marking the very first day of Project Freedom, explicitly stating that the Strait of Hormuz remains closed as this U.S. operation kicks off. I mean, this is basically the nightmare scenario for global shipping routes. a physical operational blockade of the waterway on day one of a new military initiative. But wait, because the source material paints a picture of an even broader geopolitical earthquake. The instability in the strait is definitely not isolated. It's happening right alongside escalating threats toward the UAE, severe warnings from Hezbollah, who are explicitly threatening a bloody decade using 1980-style tactics, and even the looming shadow of a US-China nuclear crisis. So the Strait of Hormuz, it's really just the epicenter of a much wider, globally destabilizing web of tensions right now. Let's move to Section 5 and talk about the real-world impact on global logistics. If you are making decisions about international shipping, energy procurement, or freight routing, this is exactly why you need to be paying close attention. A closed or heavily contested Strait of Hormuz presents immediate, catastrophic risks to the global economy. You really can't overstate the strategic importance of this route. Oil transit is sitting at the absolute highest risk exposure here, considering a massive chunk of the world's daily oil consumption flows right through this narrow choke point. Add to that the extreme disruption to commercial freight and vital regional trade lanes, and the economic shockwaves of a closure would be felt instantaneously around the globe. For those supply chain decision-makers out there, here are your primary operational security warnings. First up, you're dealing with an incredibly unpredictable airspace that is literally filled with active cruise missiles and combat drones. Second, there are massive targeting risks, especially for any vessel attempting to run silent. Third, a physical closure of this choke point forces a complete, extremely costly rerouting of global oil supply chains. And lastly, the broad regional volatility means that even finding a safe harbor nearby is becoming harder and harder to guarantee. Finally, Section 6, security warnings and our overall outlook. As we wrap up this explainer, let's quickly summarize these active deterrence measures based on the Sunnifiles.com briefing. The established rules of engagement laid out by the Iranian Army follow a very clear, very dangerous logic. Step 1, U.S. carriers attempt an approach. Step 2, Iran's surveillance detects the movement, completely negating the U.S. radar silence. Step 3, Iran executes a pre-planned decisive military response using their activated missile and drone assets. There is virtually zero margin for error or miscalculation in that three-step sequence. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on today. If this active deterrence posture remains in place and military initiatives like Project Freedom become the new normal, how does global logistics fundamentally adapt? Can global trade even survive a permanently contested Strait of Hormuz? Or are we literally witnessing the forced redrawing of the world's energy supply chains in real time? Thank you for joining us for this explainer. Keep analyzing the data and stay sharp out there.